Grace Miller stood at the observation window of Harmony Point Station and watched the stars. 60 years ago, humanity had looked up at those same stars and wondered if they were alone. The answer came when they arrived, their silver ships descending through Earth's atmosphere with messages of peace and friendship. They were gentle beings. Their skins shimmered like water under moonlight, and their large dark eyes held kindness that humans recognized immediately. They taught humanity how to build faster ships. They shared their medicine when a plague swept through 3 colony worlds and killed millions. They spoke for Earth at the Galactic Council and helped humans earn a seat among the stars. Grace remembered meeting her first when she was a child. Elder had visited Earth as part of a cultural exchange, and young Grace had been chosen to present flowers to the alien diplomat. Had knelt down to her level, taken the flowers gently, and said words Grace never forgot. "Your people have brave hearts," had said. "The galaxy will learn this someday." Now Grace was an ambassador and was her closest friend among the. They spoke every week through subspace communication, sharing stories and laughter across the void between their worlds. But had not answered her calls for 3 days. Grace turned from the window when her communication panel chimed. She hoped it was finally responding, but the face on the screen belonged to Admiral Daniel Shaw. His expression was grim. "Ambassador Miller," Daniel said, "we have a problem. Prime has gone dark." Grace felt cold spread through her chest. Prime was a beautiful planet of vast oceans and floating cities. 4 billion lived there. "What do you mean dark?" she asked. "No communications in or out for 72 hours. The Galactic Council sent us a message saying they have entered voluntary isolation, and we should not interfere." "Voluntary isolation," Grace shook her head. "They would never do that without telling us first. Something is wrong." Daniel nodded. "I agree. I am sending the scout ship Starling to investigate. Captain Laura commands her. She is one of our best." Grace thanked him and ended the call. She tried again to reach. The communication system showed the signal leaving the station, traveling across space toward Prime. No response came back. She waited 12 hours for news. During that time, she contacted the Galactic Council and requested information. High Chancellor of the Dominion responded personally. There were beings with hard shells and clicking voices. They had dominated council politics for centuries. "The matter is an internal concern," said. His multiple eyes showed no emotion. "Humanity should focus on its own affairs." "They are our allies," Grace said. "We have every right to know what is happening." "You have the rights the Council grants you," replied. "Nothing more." The transmission ended. Grace stared at the blank screen and felt something she had not felt since humanity first joined the Council. She felt afraid. The Starling arrived at Prime 16 hours later. Captain Laura stood on her bridge and looked at the. What she saw would haunt her for the rest of her life. The planet was burning. Great columns of smoke rose from the surface. The floating cities that had been marvels of engineering were falling from the sky, crashing into oceans that boiled with debris. Orbital bombardment had turned one-screen continents into scorched wastelands. "Get me readings," Laura said. Her voice was steady even though her hands were shaking. Her science officer worked the controls. "Captain, I am detecting minimal life signs. Maybe 40,000 survivors scattered across the northern continent. Everything else is gone." Laura closed her eyes. 4 billion gone. "Record everything," she ordered. "Every angle, every reading. The galaxy needs to see this." Her tactical officer spoke up. "Captain, I am detecting warships in orbit on the far side of the planet. They are council vessels and signatures." Laura understood then. This was not a natural disaster. This was not an accident. The Galactic Council had done this. They had murdered an entire species. "How long until they detect us?" she asked. "They are already turning toward us. We have maybe 4 minutes before they are in weapons range." Laura made her decision quickly. Transmit all recordings to Earth Fleet Command immediately. Priority Alpha. Then prepare for emergency jump. The Starling's communication system sent terabytes of data streaming toward Earth. Images of burning cities. Readings showing the chemical signatures of Council weapons. Proof that could not be. The Council warships opened fire just as the Starling's jump drive activated. Energy beams tore through the space where the scout ship had been a moment before, but Laura and her crew were already gone, racing through hyperspace toward home. On Harmony Point Station, Grace received the transmission. She watched it alone in her quarters and she wept. She saw the cities falling. She saw the oceans churning with ash and debris. She saw the orbital bombardment platforms still firing on a world that was already dead. 4 billion among them. Grace thought of the gentle alien who had knelt before a human child and spoken of brave hearts. She thought of the medicine that had given freely when human colonies were dying. She thought of every kindness, every gift, every moment of friendship between two species who had found each other among the stars. And she thought of the Council ships in orbit, finishing their work of destruction. She composed herself and opened a channel to Earth. The faces of Parliament leaders appeared on her screen, and behind them she could see Admiral Daniel Shaw. "You need to see this," Grace said. "They are dead. The Council killed them." She transmitted the footage and watched their faces change. Shock became horror, horror became grief, and grief, slowly and terribly, became something else entirely. It became rage. Admiral Daniel Shaw spoke first. His voice was quiet, but Grace could hear the fury beneath his words. "Recall all human vessels to Earth space immediately. Cancel all diplomatic engagements with Council species. And someone tell the Council that humanity wants answers." Grace nodded. She looked once more at the image of Prime burning and made a silent promise to her fallen friend. The galaxy would learn what happened when you murdered humanity's first and truest allies. The galaxy would learn that humans had brave hearts. And the galaxy would learn that brave hearts could burn just as hot as any star. The news spread across human space like fire through dry grass. Every colony world received the footage from the Starling. Every station, every outpost, every ship saw the images of Prime burning. People gathered in public squares and watched together. They stood in silence at first, unable to believe what they were seeing. They had been their friends. They had saved human lives when the plague came. They had welcomed humanity into the galactic community when other species wanted to keep them isolated. Now they were gone, murdered by the very council they had served for. The silence did not last long. It transformed into anger, then into rage, then into something cold and hard and determined. Protests erupted on every human world. People demanded answers. They demanded justice. They demanded that someone pay for what had been done. On Earth, the United Parliament held an emergency session. General Cole stood before the assembled representatives and delivered a classified report that changed everything. 3 years ago, said, a plague struck our colony worlds of New Haven, Riverside, and Fort Adams. 2 million humans died before we found a cure. That cure came from The Parliament members listened in silence. What we did not know until now was that the medicine was based on forbidden technology. The Council had declared certain types of medical science off-limits centuries ago. They enforced this law ruthlessly because it gave them control over who lived and who died in their empire. Paused and looked at the faces before him. They broke this law to save us. They gave us medicine that the Council had forbidden because they believed human lives were more important than rules. And when the Council discovered what they had done, they decided to make an example of them. A representative from the Asian Federation spoke up. They killed 4 billion people because they helped us. Yes, said, they died because they chose to be our friends. The vote that followed was unanimous. Every representative, every delegate, Every voice in the Parliament agreed. Humanity would withdraw from the Galactic Council immediately and permanently. On Axis Prime, the great station that served as the Council's headquarters, Grace Miller delivered the news. She stood in the vast chamber where representatives of dozens of species gathered, and she faced High Chancellor without fear. "The United Earth Parliament has voted to withdraw from the Galactic Council," Grace said. "Effective immediately, all treaties and agreements between humanity and the Council are dissolved." Multiple eyes clicked as he processed her words. "You cannot be serious. Humanity is too young, too weak to survive alone. You need the Council's protection." "We needed nothing from you," Grace replied. "They gave us everything we required, and you murdered them for it." "They were criminals," said. "They violated sacred laws. They had to be punished." Grace felt her hands curl into fists at her sides. 4 billion people, children, elders, families, you call that punishment, we call it genocide. She turned to face the other council members. They sat in their liquid-filled tanks, their tentacles still. They watched with their golden eyes, their feline faces unreadable. They remained motionless, their massive stone-like bodies showing no reaction. "I ask each of you now," Grace said. "Will you condemn what was done to them? Will you stand with humanity and demand justice?" The chamber fell silent. One by one, the other species declined. They claimed they could not interfere in council decisions. They expressed sympathy but insisted their hands were tied. They said nothing at all. Grace nodded slowly. She had expected this. The council was built on fear, not friendship. These species had watched the burn and done nothing because they were afraid they might be next. "I understand," Grace said. "You are all afraid of you are afraid that if you speak against them, your worlds will burn too. So you stay silent and hope the fire never reaches you." She walked toward the chamber doors. Before she left, she turned back one final time. "Humanity is not afraid. They taught us that some things are worth any risk. Friendship is worth it. Justice is worth it. And we will make sure the galaxy learns this lesson, even if we have to teach it ourselves." Called after her. "If you leave this chamber, there will be no coming back. The Council will consider humanity a rogue species, subject to sanctions and military action." Grace did not stop walking. "Do what you must, we will do the same." Back on Earth, Admiral Daniel Shaw watched Grace's address from Fleet Command headquarters. Around him, officers worked at their stations, preparing for what everyone knew was coming. "She did well," Daniel said too, who stood beside him. "She always does," replied, "but now comes the hard part." Daniel nodded. The Council would not let humanity simply walk away. They would want to make another example to show the galaxy what happened to species that them. War was coming whether humanity wanted it or not. "How long until we are ready?" Daniel asked. "The shipyards need at least 3 months for a full mobilization," said. "But we have enough vessels to defend Earth space now, and we have something else." "The survivors." "Yes, almost 40,000 made it off-world before the bombardment. They are heading for New Montana as we speak, and they are bringing gifts." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Gifts?" Smiled grimly. "They kept secrets for ancient technology hidden across the galaxy by a species that died long before any of the current races achieved space flight. They never shared these secrets with the Council because they did not trust them. But they trust us. They trust us because we took them in when they had nowhere else to go. While the Council was hunting down survivors, we opened our borders and welcomed every who could reach us." Daniel looked out the window at the blue sky of Earth. Somewhere up there, ships were gathering. The greatest fleet humanity had ever assembled was coming together, and it would carry weapons the Council had never seen. "They made a mistake," Daniel said quietly. "They thought killing them would teach us to fear them. Instead, they gave us a reason to fight." Nodded, "And now they will learn what that means." The stars waited above them, cold and distant. But soon those stars would witness something the galaxy had never seen before. They would witness humanity's fury unleashed without mercy or hesitation. They had wanted to make an example of the. Humanity was about to make an example of the. The shipyards of Mars had been quiet for decades. After humanity joined the Galactic Council, there seemed to be no need for massive warships. The Council promised peace and protection. The Council said humanity could trust them. Now the shipyards roared back to life. Thousands of workers labored around the clock, building new vessels and upgrading old ones. The carrier Relentless, largest ship in the human fleet, underwent a complete transformation. Her weapons systems were replaced with technology that Council scientists had believed was impossible. Admiral Daniel Shaw toured the shipyards personally. He walked through corridors filled with sparks and the sound of welding, and he felt something he had not felt in years. He felt hope. "The new weapons are installed," his chief engineer reported. "We tested them on an asteroid yesterday. Admiral, these things are devastating. One shot from the main cannon vaporized a rock the size of a small moon." Daniel nodded. "And the shields?" "Equally impressive. The technology integrates perfectly with our systems. Council weapons will bounce off us like rain on glass." On New Montana, the refugees had established a temporary settlement on the shores of a great lake. The water reminded them of their lost, and they gathered there in the evenings to remember what had been taken from them. General Cole traveled to New Montana to meet with Elder, one of the few surviving members of the leadership cast. Was old even by standards, her skin faded to a pale silver that seemed almost translucent, but her eyes remained sharp and her voice was strong. "Thank you for coming," said, "and thank you for welcoming my people. When the Council turned against us, we had nowhere to go. You opened your arms when others would have closed their doors." Sat across from her in a simple tent that served as her temporary headquarters. "The saved millions of human lives. We could never turn you away." Smiled sadly. "That medicine cost us everything. We knew the risk when we shared it with you. The Council had forbidden such technology and watched everyone for violations. But when we saw your people dying, we could not stand by and do nothing. You chose to help us knowing what it might cost." "Yes, and we would make the same choice again." Reached into a container beside her and a small crystal that glowed with inner light. "Which is why I want to give you this." Took the crystal carefully. It was warm in his hand, and he could feel energy pulsing within it like a heartbeat. "What is this?" "The key to our greatest secret. For 10,000 years, they have guarded knowledge of ancient technology left behind by a species we call the Builders. They traveled the galaxy millions of years ago, and they left caches of weapons and tools hidden on countless worlds." Stared at the crystal. "You never shared this with the Council." "The Council is ruled by fear and greed. They would have used this technology to dominate everyone. We kept it secret because we were waiting for a species worthy of trust." Eyes met his. "We found that species when we first came to Earth. Your people proved it again when you welcomed us as refugees." "Where are these caches?" "The crystal contains coordinates for 12 locations scattered across the galaxy. Each cache holds weapons and technology that will give your fleet power beyond anything the Council possesses. Take them. Use them. Make the pay for what they did to my people." Stood and bowed deeply to the Elder. "We will honor this gift, and we will honor the who died because they chose to be our friends." Commodore Laura led a small fleet to the first cache location. Her promotion had come quickly after her escape from Prime, but she had earned it. The footage she brought back had shown the galaxy the truth, and now she would help humanity respond to that truth. The cache was hidden in the ruins of an ancient space station orbiting a dead star. Laura and her team cut through bulkheads that had not been opened in millions of years. The air inside was stale but breathable, preserved by technology they did not yet understand. What they found made Laura gasp. Row after row of weapons lined the walls. Energy cannons that made human technology look primitive. Shield generators that could protect entire planets. And in the center of the chamber, something that looked almost like a ship, sleek and beautiful and terrifying. "Are you seeing this?" Laura transmitted to Fleet Command. Admiral Daniel's voice came back immediately. "We see it. Can you bring it back?" "We can bring all of it back. There is enough here to equip an entire fleet." "Do it, and Laura, the Council has sent a warning fleet to our borders. They are testing us, seeing how we respond." Laura smiled coldly. "Then let us give them something to think about." The Council fleet consisted of 20 warships, more than enough to threaten any other species in the galaxy. They took position at the edge of human space and waited for humanity to surrender or negotiate. Instead, the humans activated something the Council had never seen before. A defensive grid powered by builder technology came online around Earth and its colonies. Energy shields shimmered into existence, covering entire planets in protective barriers. The commander attempted to fire a warning shot. His weapons bounced harmlessly off the shields without leaving a scratch. He ordered his fleet to retreat immediately. Back on Axis Prime, High Chancellor received the report with growing unease. Humanity should have been easy to crush. They were young and weak and alone, yet somehow they had obtained technology that made Council weapons useless. "Where did they get this power?" demanded. None of his advisors could answer. In her tent on New Montana, Elder looked up at the stars and whispered words in her native language. It was a prayer for the dead, for the 4 billion who had perished. But it was also something else. It was a promise that their deaths would not be forgotten. The humans were gathering their strength. The ancient weapons were being distributed to their fleet. And soon, very soon, they would learn what happened when you murdered the wrong people's friends. The storm was coming, and it would spare nothing in its path. The human fleet crossed into Council space on a Tuesday morning by Earth's calendar. Admiral Daniel Shaw stood on the bridge of the Relentless and watched the stars shift as his ships emerged from hyperspace. Behind him, 200 vessels followed in perfect formation. They called themselves Task Force Fury, and they had come to deliver a message. Their first target was Station, a massive military outpost that floated at the intersection of 3 major trade routes. More importantly, had served as the staging ground for the attack on Prime. The ships that murdered 4 billion had launched from its docks. Daniel opened a communication channel to the station. "This is Admiral Daniel Shaw of the United Earth Fleet, the station known as was used to plan and execute the genocide of the people. You have 1 hour to evacuate all personnel. After that time, this station will be destroyed." The commander responded with contempt. "You dare threaten us? We are the masters of this galaxy. 1 small fleet from a primitive species means nothing." "You have 59 minutes remaining," Daniel said. He closed the channel. They launched their defense fleet immediately. 40 warships emerged from docks and moved to intercept the human vessels. Their commanders were confident. They had crushed rebellions before. They had burned worlds before. These humans would learn their place just as they had learned theirs. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. Human weapons tore through shields like they were made of paper. Energy beams that had never touched Council technology sliced through hulls and detonated power cores. Ships exploded one after another, their crews dying without understanding what had happened. Commodore Laura commanded the forward assault group. Her ship, the Swift Justice, danced through the formation and fired with perfect accuracy. She watched enemy vessels come apart under her guns and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "All hostile ships destroyed," her tactical officer reported. "Station is defenseless." Laura checked the time. "The evacuation period is not yet complete. Hold position." Some had heeded Daniel's warning. Escape pods and transport ships fled the station in panicked clusters, racing toward the nearest planet. Others had refused to believe the humans would actually attack. They stayed at their posts and waited for reinforcements that would never come. When the hour ended, Daniel gave the order. The Relentless opened fire with her main cannon. Builder technology channeled energy that should have been impossible to contain into a beam of pure destruction. The beam struck at its center and kept going, cutting through the station like a blade through flesh. Broke apart. Its sections tumbled away from each other, atmosphere venting into space, fires blooming and dying in the vacuum. Within minutes, nothing remained but debris. On Axis Prime, the Council received news of the attack. Panic swept through the chamber. The demanded immediate action, but the other species hesitated. The ambassador spoke first. "We are recalling our fleets to protect our own territory. This is a matter." "It is a council matter," insisted. "Humanity has attacked us all." "Humanity attacked you," the representative replied. "They have made no moves against anyone else. Perhaps there is a reason for that." The council was fracturing. Decades of domination had built resentment that now bubbled to the surface. Species that had lived in fear for generations saw an opportunity to break free. The ambassador requested a private meeting with Grace Miller, who remained on Axis Prime as an unofficial observer. They met in a sealed chamber where no one could overhear. "We oppose the genocide," they said. His voice was like stones grinding together. "When proposed the attack on Prime, we voted against it. We were overruled." Grace studied him carefully. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because they have been our masters for too long. We want to see them fall." They produced a data crystal. This contains the current positions of all fleets and the security codes for their communication network. Use it wisely. Grace took the crystal. "What do you want in return?" "Your word that when this is over, they will be treated fairly. We do not wish to replace masters with human ones." "Humanity does not want to rule anyone," Grace said. "We want justice for the nothing more." She transmitted the data to Admiral Daniel, who adjusted his strategy immediately. They had positioned their main defensive fleet to block the most direct route to there. With the intelligence from he bypassed them entirely. Task Force Fury struck at industrial centers instead, shipyards where new weapons were built, fuel depots that kept their fleets running, communication hubs that coordinated their military. One by one, the foundations of power crumbled. The economy collapsed within weeks. Their military, spread too thin to defend everything, could not respond to attacks that came from unexpected directions. Colony worlds that had been loyal for centuries began to rebel as they saw their masters weakening. General Cole led ground forces on one of these colonies. The garrison there had brutalized the local population for generations. Once troops landed, the locals greeted them as liberators. "We heard what happened to a local leader told him. "We heard that humans came to avenge them. We want to help." Accepted their offer. Across space, the same scene repeated itself. Species that had been crushed under rule rose up and joined the human advance. What had begun as a war of vengeance became a revolution. High Chancellor watched his empire burning and finally understood his mistake. He had thought killing would teach the galaxy to fear Instead, it had shown everyone that they could be challenged. And once that lesson was learned, there was no going back. Laura sat in her captain's chair and reviewed the latest battle reports. Every day brought new victories. Every day they lost more ground. "How much longer?" her first officer asked. Laura looked at the star chart that showed their progress toward Prime. "Soon," she said, "very soon." The stars outside her window seemed to burn brighter than before. They were witnesses to something the galaxy had never seen. They were witnesses to humanity's fury. And that fury was far from finished. Task Force Fury arrived at Prime on a day that would remember forever. 200 human warships took position in orbit around the planet that had ruled the galaxy for centuries. Below them, billions looked up at the sky and saw the end of everything they had known. Admiral Daniel Shaw opened a broadcast that reached every corner of the planet. His voice was calm and measured, but his words carried the weight of everything that had happened. People of Prime, I am Admiral Daniel Shaw of the United Earth Fleet. Your government ordered the genocide of the people. 4 billion innocent beings were murdered because they chose to help humanity. We are here to seek justice for that crime. He paused to let his words sink in. We do not wish to kill innocents. We are not like your leaders. Therefore, I offer you this choice. Surrender High Chancellor and the military commanders who ordered the attack on Prime. Hand them over to face trial for their crimes. If you do this, your planet will be spared. If you refuse, you will share the fate of the... The broadcast ended. Daniel sat back in his chair and waited. On the surface, chaos erupted. The population had watched their empire crumble over the past months. They had seen their fleets destroyed and their colonies lost. They had heard stories of human mercy toward those who surrendered and human wrath toward those who resisted. Now they had to choose. Tried to rally his remaining military forces, but his generals had already lost faith in him. His grand strategy had failed completely. The species he had dismissed as primitive and weak had brought the greatest empire in galactic history to its knees. The revolution began in the capital city. Workers who had suffered under his rule took to the streets. Soldiers who were tired of fighting a losing war joined them. Within hours, the movement had spread across the planet. Attempted to flee in a private ship, but his own guards stopped him. They dragged him from the vessel and handed him over to a crowd that parted to let human soldiers through. General Cole accepted the prisoner personally. He looked at the being who had ordered the deaths of 4 billion and felt something unexpected. He felt nothing at all. High Chancellor said, "You are under arrest for crimes against sentient life. You will be transported to a neutral location for trial." His multiple eyes clicked with fury. "You cannot do this. I am the High Chancellor. I am the voice of the Council." "The Council is gone," replied, "and so is your power." 47 other officials were arrested that day. They included admirals, generals, and political leaders who had participated in planning and executing the genocide. All of them were transported to a human judicial station for trial. The proceedings lasted 3 months. Evidence was presented from multiple sources, including recordings recovered from council archives and testimony from survivors. The accused were given lawyers and the opportunity to defend themselves. None of their defenses held. The verdicts came down one by one: guilty of genocide, guilty of crimes against sentient life, guilty of the murder of the people. The sentences were not death. Humanity had debated long and hard about what justice truly meant, and they had decided that killing the perpetrators would only create more martyrs. Instead, the convicted were sent to a prison world where they would spend the rest of their lives watching recordings of culture. They would see the art and music and stories of a people they had destroyed. They would learn the names of children who had died in the bombardment. They would understand exactly what they had taken from the galaxy. It was a fate many considered worse than death. On Prime, construction had begun on a memorial. The planet was still healing from the devastation, but life was slowly returning. Seeds were planted in soil that had been scorched clean. Water treatment systems worked to purify oceans that had been poisoned by debris. The memorial itself stood at the site of what had once been the greatest city. It was a simple structure, a tall spire of crystal that caught the light of the sun and scattered it in rainbow patterns across the ground. At its base, the names of every known victim were inscribed in both script and human English. Elder stood before the memorial on the day it was dedicated. Beside her stood the surviving members of her species and representatives from humanity who had traveled across the galaxy to be there. "We gather to remember," said. Her voice was old and tired, but it carried across the crowd. "We remember those we lost. We remember the children who will never grow up. We remember the elders who carried our wisdom. We remember the families who gathered in their homes and looked up at the sky as death came for them." She paused and looked at the human delegation. "But we also gather to give thanks. When the galaxy turned against us, humanity opened its arms. When we had nowhere to go, you gave us shelter. When our enemies hunted our survivors, you protected us. We'll never forget this debt." Grace Miller stepped forward to respond. She had aged in the years since the war began. Lines marked her face that had not been there before, but her eyes still held the same fire that had burned when she confronted in the council chamber. "They saved us first," Grace said. "You gave us medicine when we were dying. You spoke for us when we had no voice. You treated us as friends when others treated us as primitives. We only returned what you gave us." The ceremony ended with a moment of silence. Humans and stood together, united in grief and in hope. Later that day, Admiral Daniel Shaw met with Elder in private. They discussed the future of the new alliance that had formed from the ashes of the council. "They have joined us," Daniel said. "So have thee and a dozen other species. They want to build something different from what they created. Something based on trust rather than fear," said. "Yes, and we want them to be part of it. Your people nearly went extinct, but you can rebuild. We will help you." Looked out the window at the crystal memorial shining in the distance. "My people will never again number in the billions. That time is past, but we can still contribute. We can still teach, and we can still remember. That is all we ask." Commodore Laura had returned to patrol duty along the borders of the new alliance. Her ship had been joined by vessels from half a dozen other species, all working together to keep the peace. A young officer served on her bridge. His name was Cyrus, and he was one of the first of his generation to join the military. He had been a child when the genocide happened, small enough that his parents could hide him in an escape pod. "Commodore," Cyrus said one evening as they watched the stars, "do you think it will last? The alliance, the peace?" Laura considered the question carefully. "Nothing lasts forever, but I think this is different from what came before. The council was held together by fear. The alliance is held together by choice. And if someone threatens us again, if another species decides to do what they did..." Laura looked at the young officer and smiled. It was not a gentle smile. "Then we do what we did before. We answer with fury. We protect our allies no matter the cost. That is what it means to stand with humanity." Cyrus nodded slowly. "They chose well when we found your species." "Yes," Laura said, "you did." Outside the viewport, the stars burned on. Somewhere among them, the memorial on Prime glowed in the darkness, a reminder of what had been lost and what had been avenged. The galaxy had changed. The old order was gone, replaced by something new and fragile and full of possibility. Humanity stood at the center of it all, no longer the young species that had looked up at the stars and wondered. Now they were the species that answered when their friends called for help. And they always would be.